So baby number 4, the pregnancy, I feel like went really, really smoothly. I did have another subchorionic hemorrhage with this baby. But it wasn't as bad as it was with Atticus's pregnancy or with my last baby. So I wasn't actually like bleeding a whole lot. It just was there, and then it fixed itself, and then it was done. So I didn't really even notice that I had it. So I just kind of flew with the pregnancy. It was going great. It was fantastic. And each appointment that I would go to, I don't know, it was just so easy. So like the whole pregnancy, I remember the due date that I had set was like April 20. I don't even remember the due date. The due date that I had set was like April 28th, but I remember in my mind thinking I usually go a week over. I had planned a home birth because nothing was wrong. There were no complications, and the reason Atticus's was in the hospital was because there were complications throughout the whole pregnancy, and it just seemed to make sense. So I was still seeing my OB at the hospital, and she was basically, through each appointment, clearing me for a home birth. But I remember the due date that I had set was like April 28th, but I put my own in my mind due date for like May 3rd, I think, May 3rd or May 4th, because I was thinking I am going to go over. I always go over. There's not been a time in my life that I haven't gone over with my babies. So I had just planned for like a week over than the estimated due date. But then around 36 weeks, I kept having like weird thoughts. And so I would talk to Wade and I would tell him things like, I feel like if I don't get the baby out right away or soon, then I'm not going to be able to have her. And it was, like I said, just weird thoughts. And I know as a mom, you always stress and hope that your baby's doing okay and wondering and hoping that the worst thing doesn't happen. But it was just kind of a weird thought that just seemed so real, I guess. But I remember telling him, like, we need to get this baby out, which was weird because I had already had in my mind set, like, I'm not having this baby till May. I don't have to plan anything. I don't have to get anything ready. We're good. Part of what was helping me be super motivated for that was actually that we had just closed on a house and we were doing some remodeling, trying to get ready to move in. And my goal was that we would finish remodeling. I would move in, get settled, then have a baby. So I didn't pull out anything. Like, I didn't pull out any baby clothes. I didn't pull out the bassinet. I didn't pull out the car seat. I didn't even have a car seat. I didn't have anything ready. Nothing ready. Because I wasn't planning on having a baby until May. So that's why I say, like, these thoughts that I was thinking, like, I gotta get this baby out or she's not gonna be safe. It was weird because I was already, like, mentally prepared and ready to go until May. So I go to my 36-week appointment and she's doing all the measurements and everything's looking great. My belly was measuring 35 weeks, but it's not abnormal for me to measure behind. Like, it's kind of normal for me and my babies. So it was fine. Then the next week I go for my 37-week appointment and my belly is still measuring 35 weeks. So at that point, then my doctor's like, okay, this is a little odd. Let's just schedule you for an ultrasound. The measuring, what is it? Dating ultrasound? I don't know. She just says, let's just schedule you for an ultrasound to check the measurements of the baby because obviously the outside measurements aren't super accurate. So she told me to go schedule that. The soonest that I could get was in like a week or two. So I would have been about 38, 39 weeks. I think it was like 38 weeks and 6 days. So I was almost 39 weeks by the time that they could schedule my ultrasound appointment. So after that 37-week appointment, I scheduled that ultrasound appointment for almost 39 weeks. So I go back in for my 38-week appointment and my belly is still measuring at 35 weeks. So at this point, then my doctor's like, you have that ultrasound scheduled, right? So I say, yeah, it's in a couple of days. So I, like I said, go home. In my mind, I'm still like chilling. Like, my body doesn't feel like it's going into labor anytime soon. I'm still looking forward to the May date and I'm super like busy and stressed with trying to get the house ready. I'm working full time still. I'm a mom of 3 kids. So I'm just cruising through the pregnancy like nothing is happening. Again, not getting a single thing ready. Nothing is ready still. So then a couple of days go by. I'm on my way, driving up to the hospital to go get my ultrasound. And again, another thought pops into my head, and I'm like, what if I go up to the hospital and they do the ultrasound, they do measurements, whatever, and then they're just like, we have to get this baby out right now. And I'm like, nah, that's not gonna happen. I never have a baby early. That's not gonna happen. The baby's gonna be fine. Why would I even think that? I don't even want to have a baby right now. I'm not even prepared. So I'm like dismissing the thoughts completely. So I go in there and we're doing the ultrasound, and I've had a lot of ultrasounds at this point. 4th baby. So, you know, I know, and I'm very familiar with the screen as they're doing everything. I'm seeing it, and I know where to look to see the measurements, and I know what to look for. So she's measuring the head, and I look down at the bottom of the TV screen, and I know I'm almost 39 weeks. And I see down at the measurement, say 34 weeks and some days. And then I'm like, what the crap? Like, my dates are not off. So I'm looking at the measurement going, wait, what? So then I can see the tech kind of going like that too. So then she takes it off and then remeasures the head. And she gets it up to maybe 35 weeks. At the time, I didn't realize that meant, you know, small baby concerning. I thought that meant, oh, you're going to go like a month over your due date. So I'm looking at that going, oh, okay, like I had mentally prepared for May, but whoa, that was an overestimation. So now I'm going to be going like 2 to 3 weeks over my over. So I'm like going, dang it. I'm cool with the pregnancy, but I'm kind of done. Like I'm kind of done. She's doing a couple more measurements, you know, of the belly and the legs and everything, and they're still measuring about 34, 35 weeks. So like I'm just getting more and more depressed thinking I'm going to go so far over this. This sucks. Then she's like, okay, let me go get the doctor so that he can come in and talk to you about the ultrasound results. So I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. So the doctor comes back in and I'm like, okay, give it to me. Yep, I know I'm gonna go over. I know I have small babies anyways, but like, yeah, okay, tell me. So the doctor's talking to me and he's just like, okay, so like things are looking good, but it's weird that your baby's measuring a whole entire month behind. And he just kept being like, you know, it looks okay. We checked the placenta. It looks fine off the ultrasound. Your water doesn't look too low, but and he just kept thinking, At this point, like I said, it was just supposed to be a quick ultrasound appointment, and I actually had my kids at the babysitter's, and it was time to go pick them up. So I'm like, okay, yeah, hurry, tell me that I'm gonna go over so far. And he's just like, do you have a couple more minutes that you can stay and do an NST? And I had done one NST with Atticus's pregnancy, so I knew what it was, and I knew it took kind of a long time, like 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm like, So I look at my time, and I'm like, If it's going to be a quick one, then I might have time. So he's like, I just would feel better if you went and did the NST before we let you go home, just in case, just because it's so weird that she's measuring so far behind. And so I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. So I text my babysitter and I'm like, hey, I'm going to be like 20 minutes late. Is that okay? She's like, yeah, I got you. So I go sit down in the seat. They strap me up to the monitors and the nurse comes in, or the nurse that is hooking me up to the monitors. She's like, how you doing? And I'm like, I'm so done. I'm so done with this pregnancy. And she's just like, oh, hi, I know you're almost there. You're almost to the end. And I'm like, yeah. And then again, I think, wouldn't it be so nice if she just told me, let's go have a baby today? And I'm like, no, it's not gonna happen. I go way far over, and especially after that ultrasound appointment, like, it's gonna be a while. So I'm sitting in the chair, just kind of scrolling through my phone, whatever. And then I hear the nurses talking outside. Like, there's all rooms. So I hear the nurses talking outside of the curtain, outside the curtain. I hear them saying, that doesn't look so good. And I can see that they're examining something. So I'm like, am I the only one here? Am I the only pregnant mom hooked up to a machine? Are they talking about me? So I'm kind of quiet and I kind of put my phone down and I start listening. And I hear him say, we need to send this down to L&D so that they can look at it, which is labor and delivery. So I hear her call on the walkie-talkie. And again, I'm still thinking like, I'm pretty sure I was the only one in this part because they're getting ready to close. I'm pretty sure there's nobody else in here, so I'm pretty sure they're talking about me. So then she's like, okay, let me send it down to L&D. So I hear him talking, hey, are you looking at it? And then the nurse at L&D, I hear her say, it's not loaded yet. Give it a couple of seconds. Then she gets it and she goes, whoa, yeah, she needs to get down here right now. And I'm like, wait, is that me? Is that me they're talking about? And at the time, my husband's in school, like 45 minutes away from the hospital. And I'm strapped in this chair, not like ready at all. I have nothing ready at home. My kids are at daycare and I'm already late picking them up. So I'm like, I hope I'm not misunderstanding anything. So then a couple seconds later, the nurse walks in and goes, hey, great news. You get to have a baby today. You do get to be done. And I'm like, and in my mind, I'm thinking, like, when I thought all those things, it was a joke. I was joking. Like, I'm not ready to have this baby. I'm not ready. So then she's like, okay, let's get you in the wheelchair. So I'm like, what is happening? So then I call my husband and I'm like, hey, you busy? Has your class started yet? He was in school, like I said. And he's like, I'm just getting ready to walk into class. What's up? And so then I'm like, sounds like we're having a baby today. They're wheeling me down to L&D. I have no idea what's going on. I don't know the reason why this is happening. I've no idea. So then he's just like, okay, let me know how it goes. Go find out all the information. Let me know if I need to come down there. I'm going to go to class unless you let me know something else. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not even sure what's going on. So stay there. Don't leave yet. Then I call my mom and I'm like, hey mom, any chance you could come up to the hospital? She's like, there's like really bad traffic right now. If I get there, it'll take me about an hour to get up there. So then I'm like, whew, okay. So we're going to L&D all by ourselves. Cool. Awesome. So I have her on speakerphone. I have my mom on speakerphone so that she can ask nurses questions, because at this point, my mind's running a mile a minute. I don't know what I'm asking. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. I don't know what I'm supposed to find out. I'm just freaking out right now. And then I'm texting my babysitter going, hey, I guess it's going to be a little bit extra time than 20 to 30 minutes. I'm so sorry. I'll be there as quick as I possibly can. Hopefully. I hope I'll be there. Anyway, so my babysitter's like, oh, it's fine. My mom is on speakerphone asking the nurses all the questions, and I'm sitting there like hoping and trying to retain as much information as possible. So then the nurse leaves, and I get on the phone with my mom, and I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? Do I go home? Like, do I stay here? What do I do? She's like, sounds like you're gonna have a baby. Sounds like things just aren't working. Basically, what had happened was the placenta stopped working the way that it was supposed to. It was kind of dying. It's kind of getting tired. And the baby wasn't getting the nourishment that it needed from the placenta. So it was basically that she would be better out in the world, thriving, than to stay in there and not get what she needed. And later found out that it was IUGR, which is intrauterine growth restriction. So her growth was being restricted by the placenta, basically. So it was time to get her out. Again, in my mental state, I was like, I'm not ready for this. My husband's at school. My mom's an hour away. My kids are at daycare. I have nothing ready. My mental state isn't ready to go through labor right now. Like, I can't do this. So the nurse comes in and I'm like, hey, is there any possible way that you can let me go home tonight? And then can I come back tomorrow once I've gotten things settled and like am finally in a place that I can do this? And the nurse was just like, oh, let me see. So she talks to a couple of doctors. They decide, okay, if you come first thing tomorrow morning, we'll let you go home. They understood because I had kids, I had a life and everything else that I wasn't prepared to do this all of a sudden. So I leave the hospital, I go pick up my kids and I get home and I'm sitting there like, holy crap, I'm not ready to have a baby. Like I said, nothing is ready. No car seat, no baby clothes are out. They're not even in my house. Like, I'm not ready. So what do? I go home and I sit there. I don't get anything ready still. I just sit there and kind of take it all in. Then my husband gets home and I'm like, what are we doing? And he's just like, I don't know, I guess we're gonna have a baby tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, that's great. So I get my hospital bag packed. I don't even have a baby outfit to bring for my baby. I have nothing ready. But again, do I get anything ready when I go home? No, I just sit there. So the next morning, and I was super bummed too because I had it all planned out. I was going to go get my hair done before I went into labor. I was going to go get my nails done. I was going to feel cute. And I couldn't because now all of a sudden I was having a baby. So the next morning, it's like 9 a.m. and a nail salon opens. So I'm like, hey, maybe I can hurry up and squeeze in a quick nail appointment before I go and get induced. So I call them and I'm like, hey, can you schedule me for a nail appointment? And they're like, okay, cool. We'll try to squish you in. So, and I'm just waiting for them to call me in for my induction. So I have all my bags packed And I go to my mom where she's working, and I just start talking to her. I'm like, hey, you want to go to the nail appointment with me before we go up to the hospital? Because she was planning on taking me. She was planning on taking me up there because Wade had another class that morning. And inductions take a long time, so I figured you rush to the class, be done, and then come and then hang out with me. So he's like, okay. So me and my mom are just talking, and we're getting ready to go to the nail appointment when all of a sudden the doctors call me and they're like, okay, we're ready for your induction. And I'm like, dang it, I was so close to being able to get my nails done. So I call the nail appointment. Never mind, I'm not going to be able to make it. So my mom takes me into the hospital. We check in. So at this point, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning. Wade's class ended at 11:30, and then it would take him at least 45 minutes to get to the hospital. So when we get checked in, it takes a long time to get set up with everything. So we were there talking. They hadn't done anything. They hadn't started any sort of induction. They just kind of were monitoring the baby, kind of getting settled. And then my doctor comes down. She checks on me. And at the point when I got checked in to the hospital, I was already dilated to like a 3. They were getting me set up, and they were asking me, well, what kind of, like, how are we going to work forward with this induction? Like, where are we gonna start? So because of how last induction went, where all they did was broke my water and then in 2 hours he was here, I was kind of hoping for the same thing, because I didn't even have to be put on the pit at all with him. So then with this one, then I was like, let's try to do the same thing. Let's try to break the water and all walk around and see if we can't get things going. So they go discuss that plan to see if it'll work. By that time, Wade had gotten there. I kind of update him with everything that I know of what's going on. So the doctor comes in, she says, okay, that sounds good. We'll break your water and you can try to start labor by yourself. So we start walking laps around the hospital, just like we did the first time. And I'm feeling nothing. Nothing is happening. So I'm just like walking fast, like really, really fast, thinking, where are the hills? That's what does it. That's what does it for me. That's how I go into labor. So I'm walking. Nothing is happening. I walked for about an hour. Then I go back into the room. I ask him for one of those birthing balls so that maybe I can just sit and bounce on it for a while. So I'm in the room and I'm just walking back and forth, squatting a couple of times, and nothing is happening. Like I'm not getting any contractions at all. Then around 1:30, then my mom gets back and she's like, so has anything started yet? And I'm like, no, nothing has started. I've been trying everything. I've been walking around like crazy. I've been squatting. I've been sitting on this ball. Nothing's happening. I don't feel a single contraction. And she's like, well, it looks like they're picking a couple of them up, like the machine. And I'm like, it's not doing anything. I don't feel anything. So then right after that, then I have the nurse come in. Will you check me? See if anything has happened. So she checks and I'm still like at a 3, maybe a 4. So not really much, if any, progress has been made at all. So then my mom is just like we don't have time for this. So then she tells me, just tell him, just throw in the epidural, get the pit in, and then just crank everything up to the highest it can go, and just let's get this party started. So I'm like, okay, let's do that. The nurse was in there and I'm like, can we do that? Can we just go ahead and just start everything? And she's like, you want me to just call everything in there? And I'm like, yeah, let's just do this. So the anesthesiologist comes in, he does the epidural, and this time, like, it wasn't that bad that it was with Atticus. And probably because I was feeling zero pain at that point anyways, whatsoever. So they put the pit in and then put the epidural in at the same time. So then I'm sitting there and I've heard so many stories where epidurals just don't work for people. I must be really, really good at them or a really good candidate, because they work really well. I feel nothing, zero, anything. I can't feel anything that's happening to me. And so I'm sitting there and all of a sudden, I'm not even going to say it. That was so embarrassing. Right after I got the epidural, like, everything relaxed. And so I just started farting. And I'm like, who is that? And Wade was on the side of me. So I look at him and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that in public? That's so humiliating. And he looks at me and he's like, that's not me. So I'm like, is that me? That was me. Oh my gosh. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's so embarrassing. The nurse is like, it's okay. It's still a lot of people. And I'm like, oh my gosh. My mom's sitting there like, so epidurals work really well on me. I feel nothing. Oh, there was one time too. Even during, like, they gave me the epidural and then my legs started itching. So I'm like scratching it going, wait, what the crap? myself scratch my leg, so I'm itching, but I can't do anything about it. So I'm like, what do I do? Nothing happened. This labor was like the most fun, lighthearted. Like I feel nothing. I feel a little bit of pressure, I guess, but my legs are completely numb. I'm completely numb. I'm looking at the monitor, and my contractions are off the charts because they had upped the pit at the same time. So I'm thinking, okay, great. That sounds awesome. Like, easy. Labor is easy. So I'm going through all these contractions, and then a little part of me is a little nervous for what's gonna happen, and I hope that it doesn't do it the same as it did with my last, where all of a sudden there was a baby. I stop after like a half an hour, and I'm like, hey, will you get somebody in here to check me? And this was about 2:30. And the nurse was like, yeah, I will, for sure. I think they listened to me this time. So they come in, they check me, and they're like, okay, you're at about an 8. So I'm like, wow, that was easy. Cool. It had only been about 30 minutes since I had gotten the pit in and the epidural. So all of a sudden I'm at an 8, and I'm like, cool, this is awesome. So then 15 minutes later goes by, and they start calling my doctor down, and she comes in, she checks, and she's like, okay, you're at a 10 and you're ready to push. And I'm like, this is how I will always labor. So easy. It was time to push, so Wade gets on one side of me and he holds one leg. The nurse holds my other leg, and I'm sitting there, and then my doctor tells me, okay, push. And so I go, and then I go, am I pushing? I can't tell. I can't feel anything. She's laughing at me, and she's like, yes, go, you're pushing. It's working. It's going great. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I just, okay, breathe in a little bit more, push again. And then in the middle of the push, I remember stopping and being like, wait, you're not going to let me tear, right? Like, you'll watch really careful. And she's like, yes, I got it. Just push. So I'm like, okay. And in the middle of the pushing, my leg just starts hurting. But again, I can't feel anything. So I'm like, what the crap? So I look over, and the nurse is like not even holding it. She's just like letting it fall. And again, I have no control over it, so I can't lift it myself. So she's just like watching, not even watching my leg. And I'm like, So I look at her, and I'm like, oh, can you hold it up? Like, hold it. And she's like, oh, sorry. So she holds it back up, and I'm like, okay, there. So I'm pushing still, breathing and pushing. Like, it just was weird to not stress or not feel anything or anything. It just was push. And then all of a sudden, there's a baby. And I was done. And I was like, weird. Wow, this is fun. So the whole labor and delivery experience, like, there was no stress, no pain. I was totally involved, I guess, whereas usually you kind of go off into your own little world trying to deal with the pain. But then to be so involved and then just have him put a baby on me, and I'm like, oh, ta-da, I guess I'm done. There's a baby. And we did it. So at 3:04, then Nova Lane Beth was born. And like I said, super easy labor and delivery. By the time that they started everything up, the pit and the epidural at the same time, it was within an hour, and she was there. It was fun. We were laughing, we were joking the whole time. So it was definitely a different experience than I am used to or that I've had before, but it was definitely an experience that I would do again. It was something that I loved that much. When she was born, she was about 6 pounds and 9 ounces, so she wasn't too far off of what my other babies have been. I don't know why the measurements seemed so small, but when she was born afterwards, then my doctor went and looked at the placenta, and it was basically like dead. It was too small for its gestational age, and it just wasn't working. So even though she wasn't a teeny tiny baby like it had appeared in the ultrasound, I'm really glad that we got her out when we did. Like I said before, the thoughts that I was having leading up to having her, where I kept thinking like she needs to be born, I don't know, like as a mom you kind of second guess yourself a lot, but you never dismiss those things like mother's intuition. You know your body, you know your baby more than anybody else does. And when you think things or you feel things, make sure that you voice it to somebody. I didn't. I only voiced it to Wade, but luckily and thankfully they did catch it, and she was fine. She ended up being fine. I don't even want to think about what would have happened if they didn't catch it, if they didn't do the ultrasound or anything, because like I said, the placenta stopped working. It wasn't giving her what she needed at all, and like I typically go a week over my due date anyways, and I just don't know that she would have lasted that long. I'm very thankful that they caught it. I'm very thankful for the labor and delivery that I had And it was so smooth, so perfect, so great, and really enjoyable, really, to not feel any pain at all. From the very first of it, I felt zero contraction at all. So that was fun.